call this meeting, okay. How's that? There you go. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order for East Valley Institute of Technology. Today is March 10th, 2025. I cannot believe we're mid-March. Happy spring break, EVIT.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
On your spring break. Okay, so let's do, I didn't ask anyone to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Doolin, can I? Happily. Put you on? Thank you so much. I knew you're a good sport.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
I know.
All right, that takes us to item 3 minutes. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the regular meeting minutes from the February 24th board meeting.
I second it.
Is there any discussion?
Madam President, I abstain.
I am going to have to abstain as well, as I was not here. Anyone else abstaining due to absence? Okay, please call the vote by acclamation.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 4, call to the public. Dr. Wilson, do we have any call to the public?
No, ma'am, we do
I
not.
don't think so. All right, item 5, consent agenda. Is there a motion that will include all A through H unless otherwise desired?
Also move that consent agendas A through H to be approved.
Madam President, I second.
Any discussion? Okay, please call the vote by acclamation.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 6, personnel. Is there a motion?
I move the approval of item 6A, personnel.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on this? Okay, please call the vote by acclamation.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, well, this pace, I could give us 10 minutes, okay. I know, we've got some the heavy hitters are in the end of the race.
Jinx it.
I won't jinx it. All right, item 7, information and discussion. Item A, fiscal year 2025-26 contract issuance timeline. Dr. Wilson.
Madam President, members of the governing board, items A and B we touched on last week, and y'all, or the last meeting, y'all had the pleasure of sitting through a gigantic word salad by me. I don't necessarily need to do that again, but what I wanted to do is just to retouch on some points that I think are important for you before we get into the action items. As mentioned in our last meeting, by statute, we have the ability to offer contracts beginning the 15th of this month. Contracts once offered have 15 business days before they're required to be returned. Upon the 16th business day, no contracts that aren't returned are no longer, you're no longer bound to that employment. I always want to make sure that before you all make any sort of decisions, that you have enough information to feel comfortable about making the decision. And so I will respect whatever decision you guys ultimately make. I would encourage you to process the urgency of trying to have the ability for us to issue contracts on the 15th. It'll actually be the 17th, for the reasons that we are uniquely different than other public schools in which the employees that we are, our certified staff, our staff come from industry, and it is at times much more difficult for us to find a staff member. And so by us being able to get contracts out as close to the 15th as possible, it gives us the opportunity, should there be contracts offered not returned, that we know where we need to hire, right, and where we need to begin focusing our attention. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood that the 15th is when, by statute, we're eligible to issue contracts. Our goal, should you make a decision tonight that allows us to issue contracts, would be to issue them on the 17th of March, which is Monday the 17th. 15 business days after that means contracts would be due on April 7th. That then gives us, a good 6 weeks before the school year's out, before the semester's out, to try to really find folks and see if we can't get them connected to the organization before summer hits, in which we know summertime hits, it's hard to track people down here in the valley. So any questions or any thoughts that you had or concerns you had on the issuance timeline, we'd be happy to answer.
Is that 17 business days?
Business days, so it's 15 business days. So if we issue it on the 17th of March, 15 business days after that is April 7th.
2 weeks plus. No question.
I'm very glad we're getting it out early for everyone. Or-
I'm sorry?
I said I'm glad we're getting it out early for everyone and in a timely manner. I think that's important.
We'll see.
We haven't got
Okay, anything else? Okay, any other debate, comment, thoughts? Okay. Item 7B, proposed salary increases and cost to EVIT budget. Dr. Wilson.
Madam President, members of the governing board, we talked again last time about the possibility of having salary increases for our faculty and for our staff. One of the things that I have been very proud of organizationally is the decisions you've made over the past 6 years in terms of looking for ways for us to be able to increase our compensation so we can be competitive against our neighboring districts and even the other CTEDs. And we talked a little bit about what that looked like and how how we stacked up in terms of being competitive. And I made the argument, I think, that we're as good or better than most in terms of the compensation we're providing our faculty and staff. Our base level is comparable to others. So just from the very onset, what we provide individuals just in terms of their base compensation. But as we mentioned last time, our 301 plan is far richer than what many other districts offer. And 301 is the performance plan that's established by statute. So we talked about how in many cases, individuals could get, I think it was from like 6 to 19,000, something like that, on top of their base with an average of being about 15. So our base plus the 15 is the average compensation. But we know that life gets expensive and life continues to get expensive. And so we talked about the potential for compensation increases for next year. And we touched specifically on what the Phoenix Metropolitan inflationary rate was this past in December, and it was 1.6. We also touched base a little bit on what the Social Security, the federal Social Security rate was, and that was 2.6. The governing board provided direction for us to take a look at different scenarios, and certainly this isn't all the scenarios we could provide for you, but different scenarios on compensation in terms of what that would look like budgetarily and what that would look like to us in our budget. And so we started at the 1.6, and then we were directed to increase increments at a 0.5% increase. And so you see on your handout what that cost associated with a 1.6 increase is, a 2.1% increase, a 2.6% increase, and a 3.1% increase. Those costs include benefits, but the benefit cost excludes healthcare. And so healthcare is a variable that is a compensation that is provided by the organization outside of what the financial salary compensation is. We had initial discussions with our current provider on a healthcare increase, and it was significant. But I do believe that there is pathways through other entities or through looking at our current healthcare program that will allow us to mitigate or minimize some of that impact. And I tell you that because what I don't want us to do is have you go make a decision on the compensation increase and then us come back later and say, oh, by the way, we would like you to increase people's healthcare package by a certain amount as well. I don't believe that's going to be the case, either because we find a solution through a different structure in the provider or a solution through a different structure in what we're providing, if that makes sense. One of the things that we did last week, just so that we were on the same page, just so we could communicate to you, is that we took a look at what the current increase was by our current provider, the rate renewal increase. And mind you, this has nothing, this is just the rate renewal increase. This doesn't take into consideration anything that we might be able to do with a different plan or a different provider that will reduce this. And so in many cases, this is the worst case scenario, right? So the worst case scenario, that if you increased the salary compensation of our employees by 2.6, and we reduced a portion of what we provide to employees within our healthcare package, that our least paid employee in the organization would be held harmless, meaning he or she would not lose money, but they would not be making any money, right? So we would be able to offset that by structuring the healthcare plan in such a way that we're providing benefits, but the benefits look a little bit different. So what does that mean? And I don't mean to get over my skis on this, but what does that mean? One of the things that you all do that's exceptionally generous is that you provide single coverage for employees in healthcare, and then based on the structure that's in place, if you are the recipient of the lowest health care plan, then there's a cost differential between what the lowest health care plan is and what the plan is that the district provides, right? So if the plan, I'm making it up, if the plan's $100 and the district provides for up to $150, then the differential, that $50, is placed into an HSA. That is an incredibly generous, rightfully so, but a generous benefit that you provide. So in that scenario, if we said, well, if we took that same $100, $150, that 50, but instead of contributing 50, you contributed 30, as an example, that differential of the 20 would offset the rate increase at such a rate that providing a 2.6 increase for our least paid employee, he or she would break even in their finances. They wouldn't be making any less. Is that making any sense?
Yeah.
Or was that just too much?
Nope.
So what's provided for you is what a rate increase would cost the district, including benefits, excluding the health benefit. But I did want you to understand that there's a pathway within our health benefits to still provide opportunities for our staff that are as good, if not better, than what you'll find in any other organization, public school, either through a different provider or a different structure of the plan. I also want to make sure that we've had this conversation last time, that because you all have been so incredibly proactive in looking at ways for us to be able to attract and retain our instructors, because ultimately at the end of the day, instructors is where the magic happens, is that we had created this scenario in which our instructors, when you look at their contract, their hourly rate, were outpacing some of the administrators. And at surface level, that's like, well, great, they should, right? Because, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. The challenge with it is that organizationally, for us to become who we expect ourselves to be, we need exceptional instructors, but we also need exceptional administrators. And if it was more financially advantageous for an individual to not become an administrator, then what we were doing was lessening the likelihood that we could grow our own and have individuals stay connected to us and move through the organization. So last year, you all did a really amazing opportunity to kind of rearrange some of those positions. So now currently, we don't have that scenario, right? We have the structure in which you can be an exceptional educator, and instructor in the classroom, and get paid, be compensated at a rate that's at or above any of our neighboring districts or any of our comparables, with a health package that's as good, if not better, than what you would find at any of our schools, our neighboring school districts. But if you chose to stick with us and move into administration, you would still be in that situation. You would still have that same scenario because of the way you increase their salaries. The concern I have is that if we don't apply the same percentage across the system, we will inadvertently be unwinding what we wound up last year, right? We would create a situation in which we're incentivizing and paying instructors at a rate higher than what you'd be paying some of your administrators, which means at some point we're right back into that situation that you worked to fix last year. So I say all this because it would be my recommendation, and my recommendation doesn't carry the water, but it would be my recommendation that whatever percentage you choose to offer our employees, that you do it across the board. I have told you since I became the superintendent, I want to give our teachers as much as I can, as you can, as we can, every single year, but not at the expense of creating that gap again, which becomes problematic organizationally. So what's in front of you is the rate increase starting at 1.6 and at 0.5 increments, the cost and the benefits less the health care. We have a pathway towards a solution in the health care, I believe, and my advice, my ask, my recommendation would be whatever percentage you land on, that you apply that across the system, at least for this year, so we can keep the structure that we have in place that you created last year. Does that make sense?
It does. Madam President, I have a question. Yes. Are we still with the Arizona Risk Retention for benefits?
Through Kairos, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Edith. You know what it is? Can we afford this? The 3.1 or even what, 3.6?
We can, obviously, depending on the percentage that you do approve, we will have to look elsewhere to make sure that, make the necessary adjustments to make sure that we can fully fund the increases.
Thank you.
So that's a really good question, Mr. Covington, and I think that's a good answer too, Ms. Perez, good for you. Historically in the organization, we had a surplus of dollars that when the question was answered, could we afford it, that was asked, could we afford it? The answer was always yes, because there was that revenue that was in the surplus. But because we've chosen to take that revenue and put it back into the system, we're not running on that same surplus, nor should we be. So we can afford anything that you all ask us to fund, but at some point, that comes at a cost someplace else, because we don't have the revenue surplus that can just provide, significant gains increases without there being a cost removed someplace else.
Madam President, I have another question.
Yes?
So our projected enrollment is increasing, correct? Is that still in place, or are we plateauing?
So that is a question that I think is one that we're trying to desperately understand. If you look at what our numbers are right now, compared to what our numbers were this same time last year, it would present itself as a potential increase. The challenge with that is I think, we're far more efficient and effective this year than we were this time last year. So arguably, we're getting applicants turned faster. So it's not a true comparison to what was happening last year versus this year. But I also think that there were a number of issues in the numbers that we had last year that made the numbers look potentially more than they were. So as an example, in some cases, in our student management system, you would have a class and you would have a lab to that class. Well, the student is the student, but it doubled it, right? So it doubled the number. So I say that because I would believe that we're plateauing on the high school side at best, that we're underperforming right now on the adult side. But I think there are some things that give us cause for a positive possibility moving into next year. I think our recruiters this year did a much better job really explaining to the students that we're applying what EVIT is, because I think sometimes we get kids that signed up and then 2 days here they decide this isn't for them and they would leave. I think also too that Dr. Doolin and Dr. Schreiner are putting in systems that allow us to have multiple touch points with students between now and the start of school year, which I think will help increase those numbers. And we've also talked with our faculty and staff about the importance of making sure that when a student starts here, they stay with us and they finish here. I say all that because I would anticipate our numbers being flatlined, but there's a possibility that we get into the year and we're actually a titch up. Not because our numbers are up, but because we've been far more effective in the numbers that we do have. We just don't know whether that's going to present itself yet.
So if we can go back to the last meeting when we talked about the budget, and you said typically we're at a 3% deficit. Am I saying that right? But we've gone to a 5% deficit just to prepare for the potential lack of students and the ADM and that funding, correct?
Yes, for the potential lack of students and lack of ADM, but also historically the organization has not ever gone out, well, not, that's true. The inception of the organization, there was a bond. Outside of that initial bond, this organization has never gone out for a bond override or an M&O override, which we're allowed by statute to do. Again, I don't make decisions, you do, but I would encourage us to not do that unless we had to. So part of what we're doing on the 5% decline, back to Mr. Covington's question, can we afford it, is to start rebuilding some of that revenue for us to be able to continue on with our construction, be able to afford, down the road, should we actually have not only a flat line but a decline, can we have a revenue that bridges the gap for a year as we try to right the ship and figure things out. So that's why we recommended building the budget on a 5% decline this year versus the typical 3%.
I appreciate that. That's really important to note because I think this is my third time doing this, and the prior 2 years we did vote in, I think, very large pay raises. And while that feels really good, there's a time and a place and a time to be prudent, and it's a different economic kind of forecast this time. So thank you for that information. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Just making sure I understand correctly, I believe you mentioned, Dr. Wilson, that at 2.6%, the forecasted increase in health expenditure would not cost additional money for the lowest paid employee in the organization, given that raise. Is that correct?
Is that what we're figuring out? Yeah, so at the 2.6, the lowest pay, the lowest salary that we offer at a 2.6, a restructuring of the healthcare would be a cost-neutral proposition for the
Okay.
individual.
And was 2.6% the exact break even for that, or?
Not the exact, but it's pretty darn close,
Okay.
to be honest with you.
Cool.
And again, back to Mr. Covington's, we can adjust things within the
Sure.
system if need be, but the challenge with it becomes, and we've said this before, everybody likes the percent increase, but really organizationally, sometimes the biggest impact is what happens to your healthcare. And that's what happens to your family at home, and that's what happens to, so we just have to be mindful. So the way we did it was a reduction in my example from, that 50 instead of 30 instead of 50, around the 2.6, what would that look like? So we front-loaded that is really what we did.
Great, thank you.
Madam President, it's just sort of general question. I think maybe this is to, any of the three of you. The reason we had big bumps in these budgetary items in past years was because we were way behind the curve. We were not competitive with other CTEDs. We were not competitive with public schools. And what we have now, when you say we're at or better, but we're probably just about at what the other CTEDs in the state are. So if West MEC comes hunting for staff, if it comes here and we aren't competitive with them, if there are other factors that encourage it, they're going to leave us.
Yeah.
So we have in terms of protecting our really incredible staff, teaching staff and administrative staff and clerical staff, we have a responsibility to hit the mark in the way that keeps us competitive. Would you agree?
I would agree. I would think historically, the organization supported the compensation in order for the organization to be competitive in attracting and retaining quality staff throughout the system. And you all, the board, over the past 6 years have been very proactive in righting that ship. That ship doesn't stall out, right? That ship always moves. And so we always have to be progressively moving forward. I think one of the areas that we have done really well at is our 301 plan. Our 301 plan is a much richer plan than what you'll find elsewhere. The hard part with that is that when you look at the salary compensation, when you look at the salary offer on a base level between, say, a West Mac and an EVIT, they may be a titch higher on that initial offer. We may be a titch better in the long run because of the 301, but when you're sitting and talking to a new employee and trying to get them to come here, it's that base salary that sells, not that, hey, down the road you're going to get, even though that's true. Now, once you're here with us and you see that, it would be much more difficult, I think, for compensation to be a variable that pulls somebody away from us because of that 301. But it's the initial recruitment that becomes a bit of a challenge with our base maybe not being as high as others. And also, too, when we look at who we compete against, it isn't just the West Mac and the Pima JTED, it's Bob's HVAC, it's Wilson Electric, it's the private sector. And those individuals have fluctuations, but oftentimes are still in a position to be more competitive. So to answer your question, Ms. Thompson, you guys have done an amazing job. You gave those rates because it was needed for us to be competitive, but you're absolutely right. The ship doesn't stall out, the ship keeps moving, and you guys, I believe, are wanting us to be able to still attract and retain, which is ultimately focused on the base, even though there's a back end to it, but the attract is really focused on the base.
So you mentioned 1.9% inflation rate for Phoenix area last year. My recollection was it barely got to 1.9% late in the year. It was actually higher until late, and my bet is that it's significantly higher in short order. Does 2.6% keep us at that growth rate that just matches us to that sustainable place we were at?
So I'm and again, I don't ever want to try to act like it because I don't. If you were to ask me out of these numbers, what makes the most sense, I would say a 1.6 is too low. That doesn't keep us competitive. A 3.1 is too high given the financial realities that we're facing. You guys have given me the authority to have that hard to fill compensation. So if there's an urgent hire that needs to happen, that's outside the scope of what the base is. I have the authority to authorize additional dollars. I think the 2.6 puts us in a position that allows us to stay competitive in terms of how we are faring against our neighboring districts, but also gives us a bit of a safety net in terms of the overall financial burden that we're facing. If it turns out that we do have an uptick in growth, then that is only adding a better opportunity for us to be sitting here next year potentially looking at something different than the 2.6. But to me, the 2.6 is exactly what you asked for. It's what keeps us at a pace that allows us to be on par with our neighboring districts and the other CTEDs, but doesn't extend us so much financially that it carries a burden beyond what we can accomplish next year.
A question for Ms. Perez, I told you I was going to ask you this, does 2.6%, would you characterize that as a conservative figure for our budget? Is that a conservative
Absolutely.
budgeting figure?
Any other questions? All right, thank
Oh,
you.
can I just say one more thing there? I'm sorry. Go ahead and take it, Chad. Just as a reminder, when we get to the action item, right, the action item does not have a percent in it. It's just a general. So whatever you're wanting, whether it's 1.6 or 26.6, whoever makes the motion has to make the motion of the percentage because it's not within
not in
the item itself.
If somebody says 2.7, Madam Chairman, somebody says 2.7, does that complicate things?
We're done. We can't do it.
Okay, item 7, information and discussion. C, intergovernmental agreements, the IGA with partnering districts. Dr. Wilson.
So, Madam President, members of the governing board, I actually believe this was a item that you and Mr. Boyle asked for us to have on the agenda. And so I don't have anything to report out yet on the IGA because it's in its infancy. But I know this was a topic that you wanted on the agenda.
I did. I wanted to start off the discussion basically reminding the board that we are bound by statute and that also we're bound by the guidance and the findings of the Auditor General, which that was a painful report, but a good one to keep us kind of make sure that we are following the law and we are on the up and up. I know that's important to EVIT and the change, the course correction you said that we've made in the last 6 years is I think as an institution, we've worked really hard to make sure we are doing things properly in the right way and servicing students in the best way we can. And that, you know, feeds into our discussion on the budget and on salary, and it's very important for us to follow those things. That being said, this is the third year. This is our year to, you know, renegotiate our IGAs, and for the new board members, those are, maybe you do a better job describing that. I'm going to turn that part to you.
Yeah, so the IGAs are the intergovernmental agreements that we have with our partnering districts in which it kind of charts out the dynamic and the relationship that will exist between us and those partnering districts for whatever length of time that contract is approved for. It also kind of gives some direction on roles and responsibilities that we as EVIT have, but also direction on roles and responsibilities that our partnering districts have. You know, there's always going to be perspectives that are different. You know, my perspective is going to be different than Dr. Doolin, so it's going to be different than Mesa Public Schools or whoever else. Ultimately, the goal is to get to a document that is A, in the best interest of our students, B, allows there to be the ability for quality in both central and satellite programming, and then C, that there is a mindfulness to the taxpayers in terms of the funding for those programs, because ultimately, whether you're EVIT or a partner district, we all report to the taxpayers here in the East Valley. The IGA, the intergovernmental agreement, is typically a 3-year agreement, and this is the 3rd year of the 3-year. So we're beginning the process of working with our partnering districts to look at what a new agreement can look like effective July 1st. Madam President, I will echo what you said, and I appreciate what you did say, because I think sometimes there is a sense that some of what is recommended from EVIT on behalf of the IGA is driven because Chad's a real turkey, or because I might be a turkey, but the truth of the matter is there isn't any recommendation because Chad's a turkey. Most of the recommendation is rooted in A, what does statute say? B, what were the findings that the Auditor General had? Because those are findings that we're bound to. And C, what is in the best interest of students, both central and satellite, and then D, what is the most fiscally responsible way to orchestrate that arrangement. And so we try very hard to not get sideways on those four things, but I appreciate you saying that, because ultimately, those are the pillars that kind of drive that discussion.
Madam President, I thank you, Dr. Wilson, for your comments, Madam President, Dr. Wilson. I think that's the target we need to be focused on. This is the third year, and it's painful, I know, for some folks, but the Auditor General's report, I think, took your breath away, and thank you for taking that on very seriously, and appreciate the Chairwoman's observations, too. I join you in that.
Thank you. Could you walk us through just briefly on the timeline? I know it's July 1st, but maybe just kind of how overview of how the process works.
So the process can work a number of different ways. The way that the process is currently structured, or has been structured, is that we, as an institution, kind of wait and see what the initial draft IGA is from our partnering districts. And so our partnering districts will typically kind of work together to say, here's kind of what we would like to see the next 3-year relationship to look like. We will then spend time as administrators kind of better, processing it. You've been given that draft and hopefully you've had the opportunity to process it. Then we'll have a conversation with you, and you'll see tonight that there's an executive session to begin that discussion with you on the negotiations for the IGA. Then we'll take your direction and we'll work together as an administrative team and see if we can't really figure out that, did we understand what you all were hoping that we would understand, and then come back to you again at our next meeting and try to make sure that what we understood is, and what we put down in our draft matches what you all are intending. And once that occurs, then we'll send our draft back to our partnering districts and say, some of the things we really agreed on, and we think, we appreciate what you said, and we look at some things differently, and here's our recommendations. And then that process of negotiation really begins. And ultimately, what has happened in the past is Director of Legal Services and the attorneys for our partner districts will spend some time trying to get to a common ground that is believed to be in the best interest of both EVIT as well as the partner districts, and ultimately come back to you with approval for the IGA. The IGA that we're currently on expires June 30th, and so we literally have from now till June 30th to try to resolve this. Ideally, we would like to resolve it sooner rather than later, just simply because that makes it easier for everybody. But there have been some years in which the resolution didn't occur until the middle of June, and so that's not an uncommon practice either. So that's kind of the timeline.
Question, Madam President. So I want to align myself with the comments you noted, and Mr. Hobson and Superintendent Wilson as well. One thing I am curious about is the extent to which our current IGA is similar or different to other IGAs for other CTEDs within the state. And I don't know if that's something that'll come up in conversation in executive session or in a subsequent meeting, but one of the things that I'll be looking at in this particular negotiation is the extent to which we are a dramatic outlier in terms of either financial situation with our partnering districts or when it comes to compliance requirements or otherwise. So if we can have at some point a discussion about that, I think that would be good for us as well. Absolutely.
I think one of the things that we have done is to get information from the other CTEDs. What does their IGAs look like? And there's 2 other CTEDs that are about the size of EVIT, and then there's quite a few that are range lower. And so we got the IGAs for the EVIT, the CTEDs that were size of EVIT, but we also got input information from some of the smaller ones too. And I'll tell you, it's interesting because I'm always amazed at how much every single year I learn. Some of the more creative approaches to the IGAs actually came from looking at some of the smaller. So we'll begin some of that discussion tonight, and then at some point have a public conversation about it as well.
Thanks.
That'd be great. Any other questions? All right. Item 7, information and discussion. D, policy revision first read. That is Mr. Colbell.
Thank you, Madam President. This is the policy on the composition of a grievance committee.
We're going to change student conduct and support coordinator to staff member because we only have 2 student conduct and support coordinators, and sometimes there's just not enough of them to go around. And that'll also make it match what it says in the student catalog.
So any comments or questions regarding the policy read? All right. We are now on item 8, action items. 8A is a request for proposal number 25-008 for apprenticeship program and grants management services. Do I have a motion?
I'll move we approve the award to Princess Scope.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Any discussion, any input, Dr. Wilson?
Madam President, members of the governing board, this is just an effort. This is being paid out of the grant that we received for the apprenticeship. As we're growing in numbers, the logistics of tracking that becomes far more problematic than when you have 5 versus 105. And so this is actually a management tool that will allow us to be much more efficient and effective in our tracking of the apprentices.
Any further discussion? Please call for a vote by acclamation.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 8B, school year 2025-26 revised high school program fees and other fees. I have a motion.
Madam President, I make a motion that we accept item 8B.
Madam President, I'll second that.
Great. Any discussion? Dr. Wilson, anything to add?
Mr. President, you want to?
Madam President, members of the board, the request here is for additional resources that the students will receive to take with them on the class fees, with one correction on the supporting documentation that you received. The prior year approved fees for the aviation first-year program is not $175, it was $90 is what you had previously approved. Therefore, the revised fees, if you approve, would be $290 with the additional resource that the students would receive.
Okay. Any comments? Okay. Please call the vote by acclamation.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay. Item 8C, salary increases for certified instructional, post-secondary instructional, hourly, and salaried support and administrative positions, and the motion should include the percentage.
I'll move that, I'm going to request we combine C and D and approve an increase of 3.1% for both.
What you said, A and B.
It's C and D.
So do we need to have a separate motion just to include those, and then we do the
I think,
percentage?
Madam
Or can we
President,
wrap it up in one?
I believe C is for compensation,
Yeah.
and D is actually the approval
That's right.
of
Contract, that's right.
the employees.
Okay.
So I
That's
think they're
right.
actually two.
They're two separate. We need to
Separate.
keep
Okay.
it C.
Well, I'll restate it, approve C, the salary increase of 3.1%.
Is there a second? Okay, there's no second, so we need to have a different motion. So I would move that we approve the salary increase for 2.6% for fiscal year 2025, 2026.
Second.
Or, okay. Okay, any discussion?
I do.
Kind of had the discussion, do we want to say more about this right now?
I would
Mr. Covington.
like to compromise between the two and go in between them at 2.85%. That would kind of be a compromise, if anybody.
I think, Madam President, members, I mean, the conversation is a good conversation, the motion, though. So just as a reminder that if that is what the direction the board would want to go,
Yeah.
you'd have to
We'd have to change the
Restate
motion.
the
Restate
Take the
that.
motion.
It could be a substitute motion.
I think, personally, and we each can take a turn to talk about this, but I believe we've talked about this in depth, and we've had the reasons of why we need to be kind of where we are. I had the feeling that we, as an entity, saw kind of the prudent thinking of a 2.6, in that it's not going to hurt anybody, no one's going to be backtracking. but it is still an increase. But knowing we have our 5% deficit and we're in a different kind of wonky timeframe, I believe that 2.6 is probably the smartest fiscal decision in terms of what we as a board have to do. We have to make sure that EVIT is solvent, has the money to do what it needs to do. And every year we vote on this, and I believe with 2.6 that hopefully we will have more students enrolled. The goal is to grow the adult ed program. And so the goal to me is to vote on a 2.6 this year, and then hopefully next year we have the opportunity to vote on a much higher pay increase. And I know, future money is kind of like wishes and fairy tales and dreams, right? But that is my thinking, and I'd love to hear the rest of the board and your thoughts.
Madam President, I think to be fiscally prudent, 2.6 is a figure that keeps us competitive for staff. It also mitigates the issue of potentially enlarging that 5% that we are looking at. And it also gives us the opportunity to expand upon our adult enrollment and our student enrollment at the high school level without the possibility of even discussing or thinking about going out for a bond. If my colleagues will recall, bonds and overrides in Maricopa County, in different sections of Maricopa County, barely pass or don't pass. And we, in my opinion, having been a former administrator and teacher and employee of EVIT and a CTE director, I feel that we should not even go to that corner of even having to think about a bond override if we are not fiscally prudent. And I believe that if we can keep that 5% mitigated to a more conservative figure, then we have something to look forward to next year when there is time, and depending on what the federal issues look like at the federal level with education and at the state level, that we have a chance to be able to bump that up with enrollment based on the state's ADM model that is so out of whack anyway, but I won't give you my opinion on that. That is my opinion. I believe 2.6 is prudent and appropriate.
Madam President, my heart lies with Mr. Covington and Mr. Lane, but my brain tells me that Dr. Metcalf and you have I think the better argument. And although I would love to do more than 2.6, I think it's the right figure given our prior discussion. So I would support 2.6.
Thank you. Anyone else?
No, I just wanted to do it to try to see if we could compromise a little bit, but I can see where the board is going, and I'll support the 2.6.
Thank you. Will you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Mr. Hancock?
Aye.
Mr. Covington?
Aye.
Mr. Boyle votes aye. Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Dr. Metcalf?
Aye.
Mr. Hobson?
Aye.
President McAfee?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now I think maybe we could combine items D and E, can we? All the contract renewals perhaps, D, E, F, G? Do we have a motion? Oops, darn it, this isn't a touch screen. Hold on, I went too far.
Madam President, I make a motion to combine items 8, D, E, F, and G.
Is there a second?
I would second if Dr. Metcalf would amend the motion to combine and approve
Okay,
items 8D through G, please.
Okay?
What, clerk?
So I second that motion.
I make the motion that we second and
Combine and approve.
what is it?
Combine and approve.
Combined and approve items 8, D, E, F, and G. And thank you for the verbiage.
I second.
Excellent. Dr. Wilson, any comments, any information here?
No, Madam President, members of the governing board, I'm grateful that you guys are being as proactive as you are tonight to get us in a position to be able to offer contracts to all of our employees on the 17th. And so there will be some additional contracts that will come to you, as we go through, but this will actually take care of 98% of our staff. So thank you for giving us the ability to do that.
Okay, any discussion? Please call the vote by acclamation.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, I have a question for you, Dr. Wilson. When we do, we have two separate executive sessions. Can we vote to go in at one time?
You can go vote to go in
We
at
can
once.
Combine them both, okay. Do I have a-
Also, move to approve to go on you got that? Approved. For executive sessions for A and B.
I'll second.
9.
Nine, that's right, 9. Number 9, call for, we don't want to mess up
Nine.
Kathy.
9A and B, okay.
And we had a second, is that correct?
I'll second, yeah.
Okay, discussion? Please call for vote by acclamation.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
And we are going to stay in this room.
So, Madam President, could we possibly, we're going to have to ask others to leave, but I'd like my cabinet to be able to be part of this as well, because we're going to have this discussion
Good, go. Okay, yeah, you can tell my age right there, right? Okay, so we are back on. It is 8:07 PM, and we are at action item 10A, possible action regarding entering into new IGAs with partnering districts. Do I have a motion?
Madam President, I move to authorize the Director of Legal Services to proceed as discussed in executive session.
Second.
Okay. Please call the vote.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, staff reports. Dr. Wilson.
Madam President, members of the governing board, just one quick thank you. It is hard sometimes as a board to get to where you got to tonight in terms of salary compensation, in terms of contracts, and I appreciate Mr. Lane and Mr. Covington's advocacy, and I appreciate the balanced approach that was described. And ultimately, I think a board's success is the ability to have those kind of dialogues and ultimately settle on something that you all can support. And so it is nice to be in an organization in which those dialogues occur publicly and people can agree to disagree, but ultimately settle on what is in the best interest of the organization. So thank you for your patience the last 2 weeks and settling on a compensation increase from the employees, as well as approval of contracts, so we can get those out within the next week. So thank you very much.
Right, closing items. Calendar, our next meeting is, when is our next meeting?
March 24th?
24th.
March 24th, okay. And adjournment.
Madam President, I move we adjourn.
Oh! Wow. That was the most animated action item.
Need a
of all.
second?
Second.
All right, please call.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion
Thank you
carries.
again.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.